It's only in church, particularly black church. Particularly black church, that our faith become feminized. Old Testament, men. New Testament, men. God called men, he chose men. He didn't exclude women because God gave power to women. You know, he empowered women. He used them for ministry. It wasn't an issue, but he never meant for them to be more spiritual or to be more in this leadership of spiritual movement than for a man. Some kind of way we abdicated our throne or our position in spirituality and we delegated to ladies. And then ladies got to carry weight that they never was created to carry. And we are comfortable with taking a seat back and allowing our faith to be feminized. And even to the perspective that, you know, if we express faith different than them, you know, if we're not crying and rolling on the ground and, you know, dancing and stuff, that's some kind of way makes us less spiritual. And it's just not true. It's not biblical.
Because we are the church. Brothers, lift up a sound.
Manhood, a new YouTube series by Dr. Jermone Glenn for men and the people who love them. Tune in live on YouTube at 7 a.m. Central or watch anytime on YouTube at Jermone Glenn.
You know, and sometimes even when we want to have full expression of our faith, we don't follow through with it because we're afraid of what it looks like, you know. And David is like a man's man. He's like a killer, you know. He's like Goliath, you know. He's like a warrior with a reputation of war. But yet he also would go into the holies of holies and dance before the Lord with all his might and pray before God and had no problem being a king and a priest and sitting, you know, had no problem sitting in the place of his reign, but also in a relationship with God. You know, he's a poet in the book of Psalms, but he's also powerful in Samuel, you know, as he's fighting. And one didn't swap out the other one. Both of them were needed and necessary. He was both a warrior and a worshiper, you know. And we got to get back to teaching men how to go to war and to worship. And worship don't make you weak, because in church, worship is looked at as a weakness, but really it's a weapon. It's embracing my relationship with God and my roar, my hands lifted, my surrender, my tears, my sacrifice is really my strength. Yes, that's my. Yeah. But we are afraid to be vulnerable because we're afraid to look like the victim in the situation. If I'm crying, does that mean I'm weak? Does that mean I feel defeated? If I'm stressed out, does that mean I'm worried? If I worship, does that mean I'm worried because we only worship God? What I need you to do for me? But what about if that's just where I get my strength from, right? That's when I plug back into the Creator that I'm made in the image of. And that's what Jesus did. You know what I'm saying? Jesus plugged in. He plugged in to God to be like, this. If you got me down here doing this, then I got to stay connected to you. If you want me out here working miracles and walking on water and putting ears back on and doing the impossible, I got to stay connected to you. And I think the biggest trick in church is that the enemy has told men that their faith is feminized. And they never come into the fullness of their power because they won't plug in. And it's not biblical because you can't find it. So women are carrying the weight when they never was meant to carry the weight.
If a man has once felt like though he's found his purpose, and now he's on a journey to rediscovering what his purpose is, how do you go about, or how would you go about doing that?
Well, what do you think, like, why do you think you found your purpose and then lost it? Who told you to switch up?
Maybe not being healed from like the things that have happened to him.
Yeah.
And so since he wasn't healed from the things that happened to him, now his lenses of himself is kind of skewed.
Yeah.
So
Anytime you lose your way in identity, if you're a single man, you go back to God to replug into who you are and you realign, right? If you're a married man, you go back to God and then you go back to your wife. And hopefully your wife can be a mirror, a reflection of God to remind you. And if you're a single man, then you go back to God and get that identity from God, even if you feel like you out of purpose or out of place. I think, unfortunately, too many men associate purpose with a job or where they work or what they do and not who they are. I mean, and a lot of the times God gives you a glimpse of purpose that's so big, you literally have to grow into it. It takes years. I mean, Joseph, my guy Joseph, has this vision of himself that's so big that it takes him 14, 15 years to grow into it. And he starts going backwards, feeling like he's going backwards to go forward. But none of it never left. You think about David. David's first introduction on the scene, he gets anointed as king. He is the furthest thing from a king, don't know nobody in the kingdom. He's a shepherd. He's abandoned by his father. He's isolated. He didn't even get invited to the party. But yet God comes to him and starts with his identity, starts with the end. You're a king. That's your assignment, period. Even though he don't look like he's a king, when he starts, he doesn't start as a king. He goes back to being a shepherd. Samuel don't take him with him. Be like, I came anoint you king. Now come on with me, David. No, he like, go back to what you was doing. Go back to being a shepherd. Go back to take care of your father. Then he ends up serving his brother's lunch. He comes to take his brother's lunch. He's a lunch boy. Then he gets to the lunch. He sees, before that, he gets called. He's a musician, so he's playing the harp. He gets called to go to the palace. He goes, sits at the throne and play the palace. He's sitting at the foot of the seat he's supposed to sit on, knowing that's his seat, but yet it's not his turn. So he's sitting there playing, and then he gets sent back. Then he goes to the field, and when he gets to the field serving lunch, then Goliath's there. Then he go talk to Saul, and Saul like, who is this? Dude, what you mean, who is this? I'm the same dude that just sat there and played for you, but because your roles changed, I didn't recognize you. I'm asking you who you are, and you literally been in my palace. You literally played the evil spirits away from me in another season, but I don't recognize you because your role changed, because then you knew me as a musician because that was a role. Then you met me as serving my brother's lunch because that was a role. Now you about to see me as a killer because that's my role, but all the time I'm a king. God just didn't reveal it to you yet because it's not my time. Purpose didn't change. Process, plans, placement, all of those are nuances, but purpose never changed. If you know who you are, you could be who you are anywhere, and you can play any role because roles don't make you. Roles is just a function that you play in your purpose. Don't associate your purpose with a job. Associate your purpose with your person, with your identity, who you are. Don't let it change you. Don't let circumstances change you. We could go on with the story of David, but he goes from one role to the next role to the next role, all the way to 17 years later, he finally becomes the king who God first assigned him to be. But he played many roles to get there. Sometimes you got to play a role before you live your revelation.